Every now and then, when you got a little bit of fuck you money, you find yourself at your local game shop's bargain bin. You know what I'm talking about. All games $5. Buy two, get the third one free. Now, usually you go bargain diving for one of two types of games. Last year's massively overproduced blockbuster whose IP gets a release every year, or potential jank. Now, removing the obvious entry with mass-produced shit games, sometimes you stumble upon one of the more obscure titles, maybe something a little bit more risky and a little bit more quirky. And sometimes, just sometimes, you score big and you find yourself a hidden gem, a literal diamond amongst rhinestones that, wait, what the fuck? Is that platinum?
Yeah, Anarchy Reigns shouldn't be that game, but here we are. It had a lot of things going for it. A rising star developer coming off the heels of a gangbuster title to add to its already solid lineup, being published by one of the most legendary companies in the gaming industry, and a team of some of the most talented and unique developers in their field. Anarchy Reigns' story is one of a project with unbounded potential married with overzealousness, mismanagement, and sabotage. This is the story of one of the most underrated brawlers you probably never even heard of.
Okay, real quick from the top. Anarchy Reigns, known across the pond as Max Anarchy, was developed by Platinum Games and printed by Sega in Japan on July 5th, 2012, and reached Western shores during the second week of January 2013. It's an over-the-top grindhouse-style sandbox beat-em-up packed with angsty 80s action heroes, colorful characters, and that sleazy dive bar sex appeal. Loosely based off of the universe of Mad World, the player joins our protagonists Jack and Leo on a mission to neutralize an incredibly dangerous high-value target, all while slicing and dicing every adversary in their way.
Unfortunately, Anarchy Reigns was met with lukewarm reception. Critics called it generic, guilty of having a shit story, low-quality visuals, accused of being too hard, and having run-of-the-mill over-sexualized characters. But for every voice of disdain came another who was eating up every second that Anarchy Reigns had to offer, like with Roger Hargreaves of Metro calling the game, quote, an inspired reinvention of multiplayer brawling that carves out a whole new action genre for itself, those brave enough to learn its ins and outs, end quote. Sean Bell of the Daily Telegraph praising the game as a, quote, an inventive, compelling online brawler, the likes of which you won't have experienced before. It is technical and spectacular enough that it accommodates both skilled players and those who just want to mash some buttons and watch the sparks fly. So where the hell was the disconnect? I mean, clearly, at its worst, this was destined to be a middle-of-the-road budget title, as it was only $30, but at its best, Anarchy Reigns was seen as the next evolution in multiplayer brawlers like Power Stone and maybe even Super Smash Bros.
We'll get to that, but before we do, let's take a quick check of the lead developers for Anarchy Reigns. Running the show, we have the renowned Inaba Atsushi, a storied producer who's responsible for modern classics like the Beautiful Joe series, Devil May Cry, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, Okami, God Hand, Vanquished, and a handful of other phenomenal titles. Alongside Inaba is the talented Yamanaka Masaki, who at the time was previously the lead designer and lead character designer of Resident Evil 4 and Mad World respectively. Together, these two led a team of over 100 developers, the majority of whom went on to create fan favorites like Bayonetta 2, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, and their wonderful 101.
As stated before, Anarchy Reigns is a sandbox brawler that pits you and up to 11 players in a no-holds-bar battle royale. Choose between 18 colorful, unique characters like Blacker Baron, quote, your favorite pimp's pimp, who's always looking for the next motherfucker's day to ruin. Usually Jax. Armed with the super sexy fists of fire, his punches immolate enemies with his expert boxing skills. Or Douglas, a veteran warrior who fights with, quote, the twins, a pair of high-powered pistons that eviscerate opponents. He also has the unique ability of grabbing two characters at the same damn time, swinging them around like a shot put before slamming them into the concrete, Zangief style. Or my personal favorite, the Psychotic Durga, a cybernetic enhanced mercenary who can nimbly close in on enemies with a flurry of kicks. Running won't help you as his right foot can transform into the revolver cannon, a deadly projectile that deals massive damage at mid-range.
Battle Royale isn't the only thing that Anarchy Reigns has going for it. The game is packed with 13 game modes to choose from. Staples like Capture the Flag and Team Deathmatch are obviously in there, but there's also Cage Match, a close quarters arena where your skills are truly put to the test in a no items Durga only Final Destination style grudge match. There's also cooperative survival mode, where 3 players group up to take on waves and waves of kill seekers, each round getting progressively more difficult until you take on the big baddies like a fucking Kraken or the robot Power Rangers. And what is probably the most hype mode in the entire game is motherfucking Deathball. It's Rocket League with chainsaws and nail bats as 2 teams of 4 duke it out to literally kill each other for gold. It is glorious.
Like plenty of other action brawlers, attacks are broken up between quick light attacks and heavy finishers that are comboed into each other. Standard stuff. Heavy attacks can also be used for significant damage and keeping some space between you and your opponents. You can also charge your heavy attack, closing the gap between you and the opponent while potentially breaking their guard on contact. There's also the killer weapons, a unique ability or weapon that deals massive damage, like Jack Cayman's Gator Tooth Chainsaw or Rinrin's Yanlong Fans. These special attacks run on a meter, with light killer attacks costing 1 block and heavies costing 2. But when they hit, you fucking feel it, with some killer attacks outright executing enemies. And finally, there's your Rampage gauge, a meter that charges based on time, damage dealt, and damage received. Upon activation, Rampage gives you a boost in speed and damage, and allows for unlimited use of the character's killer weapons. We found it best used in large groups of unsuspecting players. But if someone also pops off their Rampage, you may be subject to some JoJo-inspired button-mashing clashes.
Players typically face off in one of 8 maps, offering huge open spaces for massive brawls. Each stage has environmental hazards, like these turrets in Honglong downtown, with some huge range that can seriously fuck you up. You also find street signs and explosive barrels to stun and knock back enemies, and sprinkled along the stages are these item slot machines that will periodically dish out different weapons and buffs like a sniper rifle or a missile launcher or an energy shield.
Throughout matches, random events will disrupt the flow of gameplay, like a squadron of fighter jets flying over and carpet bombing the surface of the map, black holes popping up and sucking in everything within its area of effect, just to piss you out on the other side of the map. Sometimes these healing bubbles called OA systems will allow you to recover your energy. Poison gas floods the stage, forcing players to escape to higher ground. There are extra mutants, berserkers, a kickboxing robot. God, fuck those things. And an 18-wheeler with chainsaws strapped to the front of it. I mean, Jesus Hoobastank Christ. There's a lot of shit going on here. It's almost as if anarchy reigns. But in all seriousness, I know you're the music guy. So tell me why this soundtrack absolutely fucking slams.
Anarchy Reigns has quite the unique sound, boasting a strong blend of golden era hip-hop mixed with tracks influenced by the club scene of the late 90s, early 2000s, and all wrapped together with a modern twist. Like with the Mad World score, Platinum Games decided to move forward with a largely unknown group of artists, with the exception of Dilated Peoples. Artists like Ox, Doja Rays, Sick YG, and Bandy Legs make a reappearance alongside newcomers like the Carolina-based Trey Dot, Skits the Summer Rider, Wonder Brown, Muse One, Rushton and Diamond, B Styles, Theory Has It, and Josh Clemens. The decision to gather up a group of underground rappers rather than a few well-established artists probably allowed the production team the creative freedom to do whatever the hell they wanted. It's a sentiment echoed by lead composer Naoto Tanaka, who in his development blog explained the goal of Anarchy Reigns' composition was to create a new style of music, by using the grooves of Mad World as the foundation and building upon them with that Platinum Games flair. The production was mainly split between Tanaka and Yamaguchi, who were 2 of Platinum's more seasoned composers, alongside some input from junior composer Akira Takizawa, and together produced one of the most fascinating hip-hop fusion records.
Okay, here's where I've got to jump in and tell the viewers why this soundtrack is a fucking banger. Jump back to December of 2012, roughly 1 month prior to the North American release date of Anarchy Reigns. I happened to be watching one of my favorite YouTubers who imported Max Anarchy and made a video about it. Now, this is the first time I've ever even seen this game, and I'm asking myself, what the fuck is this? And then this hook hits me.
No hopes and no dreams, I'm useless. No cares and no fears, I'm useless. No hopes and no dreams, I'm useless. I'm useless cause I'm ruthless. No hopes and no dreams, I'm useless. No cares and no fears, I'm useless. No hopes and no dreams, I'm useless. I'm useless cause I'm ruthless.
At that point, it was over. I sped down to my local GameStop and made the only pre-order for Anarchy Reigns right then and there. Immediately thereafter, I started hunting down this killer soundtrack, finding a YouTube playlist, and blasted that bitch on repeat 24/7. Seriously, it was almost like I developed an unhealthy addiction to this audio crack. I mean, come on! How can this not get you hyped as shit?
Hey, I could kill 'em all. 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 I could kill 'em all.
I do have some reservations on the music itself. It's critical to understand the importance that a soundtrack has to a video game in giving that player the total immersion experience, and Anarchy Reigns has that in spades. It is the perfect music to get murdered by. But as a standalone record, I feel like it struggles with its consistency. We've got 13 artists with varying degrees of lyrical prowess, and on one hand, we go from the smooth flow of Ox's Sound the Alarm, where he's describing himself as a one-man army blazing in and killing motherfuckers, to Bandy Legs' I Know You Want Me, where it seems like she's awkwardly trying to seduce a guy on the battlefield. I don't know. And some of the skits, dude, are just absolutely painful to listen to.
Oh man, I'm so glad I wore my quarantine suit today.
No kidding! Hey, somebody take a look at that freakazoid over there. He's really disgusting.
Oh, shit! They spotted
He
us.
takes one step any closer, I'm gonna throw my plasma cannon and blast him.
Look, I 100% agree with how a soundtrack enhances gameplay. We're not denying that. But for me, I still find myself listening to this record nearly 7 years later. Hell, I finally bought the damn physical album just last month.
Good morning, beautiful. I had a wonderful time last night.
What are you doing?
I told you to knock!
Now, there's a lot to love and enjoy about Anarchy Reigns, but it does have its Achilles heel. Anarchy's campaign leaves a lot to be desired, and as stated before, Anarchy Reigns takes place in the same universe as Mad World, but it doesn't necessarily exist within its same continuity. Some of the characters make a reappearance, like Jack Kamen, obviously, his assistant Amala, the murderous dominatrix Mathilda, Rin Rin, who should be dead, Big Bull, who should also be dead but is now a 4-year-old cyborg. Like, you get the point. The first issue is that the connections between Mad World and Anarchy Reigns can be a little bit confusing because there's so much content that relies on each other, yet other aspects that blatantly are contradicting. Like, you can't have the Blacker Baron without establishing the Black Baron, or at least acknowledging him.
The simple answer could be that death is simply just a gag within the universe. I mean, we are talking about a guy who would get killed while explaining every minigame, only to come back 15 minutes later. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's actually get into the plot line itself. Anarchy Reigns' storyline is split in two halves. The black side featuring bounty hunter extraordinaire Jack Kamen, and the white side with rookie cop Leonhard Victorion. Yes, very Sonic Adventure 2, I know. We find ourselves starting off in the shithole known as Alhambra, where Bureau of Public Safety, or BPS for short, Agent Maximilian Caxton, has gone rogue after the murder of his wife. His arrest has been left to the capable hands of BPS Strike 1 Task Force, Max's former team comprised of team leader Nikolai Bulgin, Sasha Ivanov, and our boy Leo. Their mission is simple: find Max and bring him in cold. Contrary to this, we find that Jack Kamen also has his eyes on the deranged agent after taking up a job by Caxton's daughter, Jeannie. On the surface, he plans on subduing Max and bringing him back to BPS alive to stand trial. That said, he struggles with inner turmoil as it's revealed that Jack's adoptive daughter, Stella, was killed in the crossfire of a botched rescue mission at the hands of Max.
Thus begins the proverbial tug of war between Jack Kamen and Leo Victorion, as they and their allies not only battle against each other's objectives, but also struggle with their own goals and ideals. Without spoiling too much, Leo is found at odds against his superior officer Nikolai, constantly arguing and questioning his orders in regards to assassinating their target Max. For Leo, Max was a father figure, taking he and his team under his wing when they were just starting out in BPS. Leo argues that Max should be punished for his alleged crimes, but rather than killing him on sight, he needs to stand trial. These frustrations come to a head when Leo sabotages Nikolai's attempt on Max's life, affording him the chance of a hasty retreat. As for Jack, he constantly flip-flops between fulfilling Jeannie's wish and bringing Max to the authorities versus taking revenge on the man who killed his daughter. Jack's mental state is consumed by the grief of losing Stella, which materializes into rage when he faces off against Max. Jack is talked down before going full berserker, albeit poorly, by the support network found in Amala and the Blacker Baron, but the reality check comes in the form of his interactions with his rival Leo, who is willing to put his life on the line for the man who raised him. On the surface, this all sounds intriguing. Watching the characters wrestle with themselves between doing the right thing or satisfying the flesh, so to say, always makes for good TV. Unfortunately, the campaign plays in the shallow end, never really delving deeper into this dichotomy beyond the basic lawful versus chaotic character tropes that you'd find in like some core D&D handbook. There's a lot of missed opportunities in fleshing out key plot elements, and the end result feels rushed and half-baked.
To us, it's clear that the campaign is one of the weakest facets to Anarchy Reigns. Yeah, you might have a few laughs here and there from the roided out Chris Tucker, but the real issue isn't even found in the storyline, it's in the mission pacing. You see, each chapter is layered between a story mission and a free mission. You'll typically start a chapter by romping around in the overworld before unlocking yourself a free mission. These free missions pit you against a horde of kill seekers or mutants with the simple task of taking out 50 enemies, or get stuck with something even worse, like an escort mission. Other times you'll be treated to a sniper challenge and get thrown into a helicopter shooting bad guys. Those missions are entertaining, and they break up the monotony of slaying the free-flowing stream of mindless drones running towards their demise.
The problem is that those fun missions come few and far between, as the lion's share of free missions are made up of mundane survival-style game modes, which brings us to our next issue, the milestone system. In order to progress through the story, you have to unlock these missions by meeting score thresholds. So a new chapter starts off with you needing 3,000 points in the overworld, and that unlocks a free mission. But when you complete a free mission, you don't just automatically unlock the next story mission. No, you have to net 100,000 points before being able to progress the story further. That sounds fine and dandy, sure, most of the time you can gather enough points in a single mission run. However, there is just going to be some missions that you suck at, and you'll be stuck doing the same mission over and over again until you hit that threshold. That shit is really annoying when I'm trying to get invested in your story-driven campaign. This mission structure in Anarchy Reigns makes me miss how stages were fleshed out in Mad World. There were no separate missions to go hunting for. Instead, whatever stage you were on had events and gimmicks that were unlocked once a certain threshold was reached. Environments were fucking littered with traps and hazards to kill bad guys with, and you were rewarded for your creativity. Trapping a baddie with a tire and running a signpost through his skull, top it off by body fucking him into a rose bush? That is true fucking anarchy. Score enough points and you'll get the chance to throw a motherfucker into a jet turbine, launch thugs into spiked billboards, or use a dude's head to practice your 9-iron.
All in all, the difference between the campaigns of Anarchy Reigns and Mad World is that Anarchy Reigns gives you a set of tasks to accomplish. They can be fun, they can be boring, but over time you feel like you're just completing chores off of a checklist. In Mad World, you're exploring a sadist playground that changes in real time, and it's far more entertaining to take on the enemy when literally anything in the environment is a weapon. I know we've been shitting on the story mode, but there's a legitimate reason on why it feels like the campaign was just shoehorned in. That's probably because it was shoehorned in. Platinum Games keeps some pretty detailed behind-the-scenes blog posts on their website. While we couldn't confirm when development actually started for Anarchy Reigns, we do know that it was announced on January 27, 2011, with the intent of releasing it sometime in August 2011. We can also surmise that Platinum's previous game, Vanquish, started development in 2007, and wrapped up production sometime in the middle of 2010, with 32 of the 300 developers jumping into Anarchy Reigns. So I think that it would be a safe bet that Anarchy Reigns was only in development for around 2 years at the most. but on August 3rd, 2011, Platinum arbitrarily revealed the story trailer while pushing the game back to mid-2012.
Fast forward to November 22nd, 2012. The game has already been released in Japan for 5 months, and the Western release is slated for early January. No Plant Sato, who I believe is Hirono Sato, released a blog post on the backstory of Anarchy Reigns' campaign. It's told in this over-the-top and comedic style, but when reading between the lines, you'll learn that the campaign mode was decided on 1 year before its eventual release. Remember, the original release date was supposed to be August 2011, and it wasn't officially pushed back to 2012 until the month of its original release date when showing off the story trailer. Sato then goes on to talk about how he essentially had to crunch in order to get the story mode done, but kept on running into pitfalls with production because of balancing issues within multiplayer aspects. To quote directly, Anarchy Reigns is, above all, a multiplayer game. Gameplay is tested and changes are implemented every day. Campaign mode works with these changes and rebalances everything to make one-player mode play smoothly, but every time multiplayer mode changes, campaign mode has to change as well.
Sato goes on to talk about these incredulous periods of crunch, with team members collapsing from overwork, influenza, and sleep deprivation. Management also kept juggling the development of the campaign in the air whenever there was issues with the game's multiplayer. Not exactly painting the development of Anarchy Reigns in a positive light, as the team mismanaged their resources by taking on more than they could handle. Which is unfortunate, because what is otherwise a solid brawler is ultimately marred by a last-minute campaign that didn't get the attention it needed to match the quality of everything else. But at least by the time Anarchy Reigns was finished, Platinum and Sega proudly presented it to the masses with boundless adoration and support, right?
No. In the coming months leading to the international launch, Platinum worked very hard, albeit very chaotically, in making sure that they were hitting their midsummer deadlines. Localization teams wrapped up well into advance of the release date, but no one saw the bombshell Sega was about to drop on the developer. On June 18, 2012, Sega announced that Anarchy Reigns would not see a Western release until the first quarter of 2013, a decision not negotiated with or shared with Platinum Games higher-ups. Atsushi Inaba later went on to Twitter to express his frustrations on the matter. To quote, "First of all, we are done with the international versions of Anarchy Reigns. The delay is not due to further development of the game, and today's Q1 2013 release was the first that we heard of it. Even if we wanted to, we can't comment on it, as we're still officially in the dark." To make matters worse, Anarchy Reigns got completely hosed in initial sales, with the PS3 version barely selling over 20,000 copies, and the 360 version not even hitting 5,000. But that's what happens when you launch your game in the same period of a brand new mainline Pokemon entry that has reigned supreme 3 weeks running. Sega, in particular, was going through a significant rough patch in the late 2000s, early 2010s. The publisher was already hit with multiple commercial failures, with the likes of Knight's Journey into Dreams, Binary Domain, Conduit 2, just to name a few. This forced them to shut down development on new games and start laying people off. They then shifted focus to more established IPs like Sonic, Total War, Football Manager, and the Aliens franchise, which is fucking hilarious. But Sega wasn't exactly thrilled with Platinum either. After a subpar port of Bayonetta for the PS3 and just not seeing the sales that they expected off of Vanquished, the goodwill Platinum built after their first 3 games waned. Smelling another failure, Sega put a stop to the international release, hoping that pushing the game to after the holiday season would soften the blow of total defeat. Likewise, Platinum was fed up too. Dissatisfied with the lack of communication coming from Sega, Platinum started quietly casting their line elsewhere, midway through development of Anarchy Reigns, mind you. They caught the eye of a certain Hideo Kojima and introduced them to the idea of creating an action game following Metal Gear's cybernetic ninja, Raiden, thus marking the beginning of Platinum Games' entry into licensed work.
As for Anarchy Reigns, it got lobbed to the wayside. A dedicated fan base stuck around in its initial years, but it never picked up the momentum that Inaba and Masaki expected. And because of that, support for the game's multiplayer quickly died out. One of the fatal flaws of Anarchy Reigns lies in the balancing of its characters. Given a few hours on matchmaking, players can easily pick out which characters stand above the rest. We're not talking like in any other fighting game where the character potential gap is slim. We're talking massive skill differences. Characters like Zero and Durga remain the undisputed top characters due to their unmatched 360 skills, killer weapons, and anti-airs. Additionally, there was just some crazy-ass unfair glitches, like Baron's one-hit KO killer weapon glitch that would exploit players with poor connections, or the fact that half the roster could pull off an infinite combo. But despite its shortcomings, and believe us, there's plenty, Anarchy Reigns still proves to be a load of fun. While the story is lackluster, it offers an incredible selection of game modes to choose from, backed by a killer soundtrack. Just jumping in, combat is mostly fluid, with varied move pools that allow you to react and counter any threat coming your way. The maps offer an extra layer of chaos with its random effects that keep the mayhem from getting stale. Anarchy Reigns was an ambitious project, and with a little extra care, could have stuck its landing.
It is an unfortunate side effect from poor management, and everyone involved can take a share of the blame. Anarchy Reigns shouldn't have been destined to find itself in the $5 bargain bin, but its legacy will always stand as that platinum game that had the potential but was thrown to the wayside. Without a doubt, Anarchy Reigns is an ugly baby, but if you're willing to take a shot in the dark with a game that is filled to the brim with style and sass, you should certainly give Anarchy Reigns a shot. Hey, Antichrist here. I hope that you enjoyed the video. It would help me out a lot if you would like, comment, and subscribe. All that stupid bullshit that every single YouTuber chills out for you. Tell me what you want to see next. I'm open to ideas. I don't really have anything planned after this. This video was kind of a long time coming. So, anyway, until next time, I'll see you later.